Breaking news. Everything is terrible.
It is for Harley Davidson. Sales are down 7.2% in 2023. They're down in every region Harley sells bikes. North America, South America, Europe, Japan, China, Korea. Down 55.6% in India. I guess the Royal Enfield Super Meteor is eating Harley's lunch over there. But that's not the real issue, is it? And it's not competition from Indian motorcycles either. Indian the company, not the country. People just stopped buying new Harleys, especially the millennials, adults currently ranging between 27 and 42 years old. Check this out. Harley sales in the last 10 years are down by 50%. Keep in mind that the populations of the United States and Canada, Harley's primary stomping grounds, have increased. Yet sales are half of what they were a decade ago. And yes, I do realize that some of those 2014 sales were of less expensive bikes like the old air-cooled Sportsters and even the Streets, which debuted 10 years ago, although nobody ever bought the Streets. But the big bikes have always accounted for the majority of Harley sold, and even Harley CEO Jochen Zeist admits that the current trend is worrying. So what factors account for this drop, and what, if anything, can Harley head office do about it? Stay tuned for the analysis, and if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing, liking the video, and sharing it with friends. First, let's go over two reasons which people bring up for Harley's downfall that are probably not correct. The first is Indian motorcycles. Great bikes, I'd love me a Chief ABS, but at this point, Indian still doesn't sell enough bikes or have an extensive enough dealership network to threaten Harley. They've probably swiped a small percentage of Harley's sales, but not nearly enough to cause a 50% drop in 10 years. In fact, I'd be surprised if the troubles that are affecting Harley aren't also plaguing Indian. The other often cited reason for Harley's downtrend is that it's an old man's bike, and I don't think that this is the problem either. Millennials don't find their grandpa's bike uncool. A lot of them watch this channel and would probably love to own a Harley. Love them or hate them, Harley Davidson motorcycles have exemplary levels of fit and finish and sound and feel like nothing else on the road. Everyone appreciates nice things, especially if they carry that nostalgia factor. Many Americans and Canadians remember their dads cruising around on Harleys, and it brings back good memories. No, it's not that millennials wouldn't like a new Harley, it's that they can't afford it. And of course some can, but the percentage of younger people who can is smaller than it used to be. On the one hand, Harley has gotten rid of its most affordable bikes. Not the Streets, no one bought those anyways, the air-cooled Sportsters and the Dynas. Your entry-level Harley is now the Nightster at $13,500 US, and if you want a backseat and passenger pegs on that, that'll be an extra $1,500. I think that model also comes with a sticker for your forehead that says sucker. On the other hand, the middle class and young adults in particular have been squeezed financially over the last couple of decades. Education, housing, rent, and car prices, the things that younger people spend the majority of their salaries on, have risen dramatically. Whenever we have an economic crisis, Western central banks print money to bail out the economy. Due to the way our free market economy is structured, most of that money ends up in the pockets of rich people who then have to put it somewhere. And over the last decade, those rich people have put it in stocks, the top 10% of Americans own 89% of the stock market, and real estate. Yep, rich people buy houses because they know that houses will appreciate in value, and this trend raises demand for real estate, which is the reason why housing prices have gone through the roof, especially since the pandemic. Most young people nowadays either cannot afford a home by themselves or are paying so much on their mortgage that they are house poor. If they can't afford to buy, they're paying crazy rents that keep them poor. And when you're feeling poor because you have a huge mortgage or are paying astronomical rent, you know what you're not gonna buy? A Harley. Or an Indian or Ducati or BMW for that matter. So the world is divided into the haves and have-nots, and millennials as a generation right now at least are the have-nots. The housing bubble is causing a widening wealth gap, and most millennials are caught on the wrong side of that divide. And if you're muttering to yourself that they should quit buying $8 lattes and avocado toast, that's not the problem. The problem is that they got screwed by the system and are the first modern generation that will not be better off financially than its parents. So obviously they can't drop 25 to 30 G's on a luxury bike. And if they want a Harley, they can get one used. There's such a glut of used Harleys on the market that there is never a need to get gouged by a dealer. Just buy a lightly used one privately for a fraction of the price and enjoy. Yes, Harleys hold their value, and Harley dealerships have been trying to keep control of the used market by offering incentives to trade bikes in, but believe me, it is always better to sell or buy a used bike privately than to trade it in or buy from a dealership. The dealership has to take their cut, and that comes out of your pocket. You'll save thousands by selling or buying privately. So that's what younger riders do. They look for deals. And quite frankly, people buy Harleys for their sound and feel, and older twin cams don't look or sound that much different from new Milwaukee 8s. In fact, they may feel a bit better, even if they are slightly slower. The problem with selling retro bikes is that current bikes look, sound, and feel rather similar to 10-year-old ones. So why would you pay 3 times as much, especially if you already have a student loan payment and a mortgage? And all of this costs the company sales on their new bikes. Besides the affordability factor, there are some cultural issues as well, and one that may turn off millennials in particular is Harley riders' elitist attitude and exclusionary culture. There are Harley-only clubs, Harley-only group rides, and a lot of upturned noses at riders who turn up on, say, a metric cruiser, even if it does basically the same thing a Harley does. This is a huge turnoff to the younger crowd. Millennials were brought up to value including everyone, and these attitudes go against that ethos. To be sure, most Harley riders don't act like that, but there are always a few who look down on anything but their own brand and turn a ride into a you-know-what measuring contest. Personally, I'm a Gen Xer, not a millennial, but I'm of the opinion that if I have to swaddle myself in a particular corporate logo in order to belong to a group, I'd rather not belong to that group. The vast majority of Harley riders don't share that toxic attitude, but there are still folks in the community who are happy to perpetuate it. And unfortunately, sometimes that spills over into the showrooms with the sales staff. I have to be clear here, I have never met a rude, hostile, or elitist Harley salesman. Most of them are perfectly cool people who enjoy riding their motorcycles as much as anyone. The problem is that most of these folks display good knowledge of their brand and of cruisers in general, but very little awareness of motorcycling outside of a Harley showroom. There is the occasional one who has road raced or dirt biked and can talk about brands other than Harley, but these folks are in a minority. Many of them think that sticking the letters ST on a street glide makes that 900-pound motorcycle a sport tourer. As a result, many experienced long-time riders go into a Harley dealership and get the impression that the staff are underinformed, which reflects poorly on the brand. Kawasaki staff know about and can discuss my Yamaha Tenere 700, and most Ducati salespeople can tell you all kinds of things about BMWs and Triumphs, but a large portion of Harley sales staff seem to exist in a parallel universe where Harley Davidson is the only brand. Go into a Harley dealership and ask them how the Pan America compares to a BMW R1300 GS, and more often than not, you'll see them sweat. People who know every nut and bolt on their road glide will often have zero perspective of how that bike compares to offerings from other brands because they've never even considered riding another brand, so they haven't bothered to research it. And that works when your brand is the 800-pound gorilla of the industry. Since the early 90s, Harley has ignored what the competitors are doing and simply built cool-looking and sounding bikes, and it worked because they were the American brand, and to their customers at the time, that was all that mattered. However, those customers are older, many might have bought their last Harley already and won't be searching for a new one again. And new potential customers, the Millennials, have different priorities. They look at performance and value, two areas in which Harley Davidson lags behind. Younger people appreciate the value and reliability of Japanese motorcycles and are also impressed by the incredible performance of Euro brands like Ducati and KTM. Let's face it, to them, a Harley Davidson is a heavy, ponderous, and very expensive motorcycle, even if it is beautifully crafted. A Yamaha MT-09 is a tremendously fast and well-handling bike which would leave every Harley for dead on a twisty road, yet only costs $10,500 US, $3,000 less than the Nightster, the cheapest Harley. In reality, the difference is even larger as the typical Harley dealer will tack on all kinds of extra charges onto that MSRP. Harley riders may respond that the MT-09 is ugly, and I'd agree. But trust me, from the saddle, when you hear that triple start to growl and the bike wants to power wheelie in third gear, you won't give a damn what it looks like. And frankly, have you seen the left side of the Nightster? Not exactly a looker with all those exposed hoses. And it doesn't even feel traditional like the old Sportsters used to. You can only attract so many people into the showroom with the announcement of bold new colors every year. Harley tried to build an MT-09 fighter called the Bronx, but scrapped the project, probably because it became obvious that this bike would be heavier, slower, and more expensive than the competition from Japan and Europe. Ditto for the rumored Pan America 975, which would probably get eaten alive by the KTM 890 Adventure and other motorcycles in this class. Harley shelved that project because the bike would just be a less capable version of the Pan America 1250. Same weight, less power. As I stated before, people buy Harleys because of the way they look and feel. However, when they stop looking and feeling unique, they have to compete on merit. The Pan America 1250 and Sportster S can do that, but I have a feeling that the Bronx and Pan America 975 couldn't. It's dog eat dog in these categories, and Harley engineers don't have the same experience and track record as designers from Yamaha, Honda, and Ducati. So is there anything that Harley Davidson can do as a company to return to its former position of dominance in the North American big bike market? No. Rising competition means that firms from Japan and Europe, as well as relative newcomers like Royal Enfield, will continue to crowd Harley out. There is one factor that could lead to a tick-up in sales in the next couple of decades, but it's a bit morbid to think about. We're standing on the cusp of the biggest wealth transfer in the history of the world, as the boomers, the richest generation ever, will eventually pass on, and their children, the millennials, will start inheriting their wealth. Will some of these folks spend their inheritance on shiny new Harleys? The motor company better hope so. This is still a few years away, but Harley brass hopes that when this wealth transfer arrives, Harleys are still coveted by millennials. Otherwise, what I always warned about will happen, and Harley Davidson will be relegated to a niche company building very pretty, very expensive showpieces for a small number of very wealthy customers. Given the company's past, I can't imagine that any of its founders would be happy about that. So, what do you think? Are you a millennial, or do you know any? Is there any chance that you or the millennials in your life will ever purchase a new Harley Davidson? Please share your thoughts on the state of the motor company in the comments below. Thanks for watching, rumble on, and may the spokes be with you.